السلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. Inshallah, we'll pick back up tonight with the reading from the book known as Sharh Usul اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة, the explanation of the fundamentals of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah والجماعة by Abil Qasim Hibatullah ibn al-Hasan ibn Mansur al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 418 after the Hijrah. And we're in the first real chapter of the author, where he's bringing narrations. If we say chapter 1 after the introduction was introducing the people that Allah preserved the Sunnah, revived the Sunnah, and those who called to the Sunnah, introducing those people, then this second chapter is about the reward of those who preserve the Sunnah and revive the Sunnah and call to the Sunnah, invite others to the Sunnah. So this is about the reward of those who take on this responsibility. And we talked about how the foundation and the intention of the student of knowledge is to call or to raise the ignorance off of himself, and to raise the ignorance off of others, and to defend the religion and preserve the religion. And so these have a lot of those qualities that we mentioned. These narrations are going to be dealing with those qualities of preserving the Sunnah. What does the individual get who preserves the Sunnah, as well as the individual who revives it, who brings up something new and reignites it and reinvigorates the people towards applying that Sunnah, as well as those who call and invite the others to the Sunnah, even if they themselves don't get to act upon a particular part of the Sunnah. They call and invite others to that aspect of the Sunnah. And so we see here some overlap between where we are in this book and actually where we are in the book Al-Jam or Jami' Bayan al-Ilm wa Fadlihi, right? The compilation that deals with the clarification of knowledge and its virtue. And so we said that this chapter had some length to it, so we'll get right into it. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-Lalaka'i, he says, the seventh narration in his book, he says, أخبرنا علي بن محمد بن أحمد بن بكر قال حدثنا الحسن بن عثمان قال أنبأنا يعقوب بن سفيان قال حدثنا عبد الله بن عثمان قال أنبأنا عبد الله بن المبارك قال أخبرنا الربيع بن أنس عن أبي داود عن أبي بن كعب أنه قال عليكم بالسبيل والسنة فإنه ما على الأرض عبد على السبيل والسنة وذكر الرحمن ففاضت عيناه من خشية الله عز وجل فيعذبه وما على الأرض عبد على السبيل والسنة فذكر يعني الرحمن في نفسه فقشعر جلده من خشية الله إلا كان مثله كمثل شجرة قد يبس ورقها فهي كذلك إذ أصابتها ريح شديدة فتحات عنها ورقها إلا حط عنه خطاياه كما تحات عن تلك الشجرة ورقها وإن اقتصادا في سبيل وسنة خير من اجتهاد في خلاف سبيل وسنة فانظروا أن يكون عملكم إن كان اجتهادا أو اقتصادا أن يكون ذلك على منهاج الأنبياء وسنتهم. Allahu Akbar. This athar is azim. This is an important athar from the Sahaba, a statement of a Sahabi that has an abundance of benefit in it. Al-Lalaka'i, he said that Al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Bakr, he informed us. He said that Al-Hasan ibn Uthman narrated to us. Al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Bakr informed us. He said that Al-Hasan ibn Uthman narrated to us. He said that Yaqub ibn Sufyan informed us. he said that Abdullah ibn Uthman narrated to us. He said that Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak informed us. He said that Rabi' ibn Anas. Rabi' ibn Anas, يعني معروف. هذا أخو أنس. I mean, no, sorry, this is somebody else. I'm thinking of Nadr ibn Anas. No, this is somebody else because it's Rabi', the uncle of Anas, Rabi' ibn Malik. Now, he says that Rabi' ibn Anas informed us on the authority of Abi Dawood, on the authority of Ubay ibn Ka'b, who said, so the Sahabi Ubay ibn Ka'b, he said, upon you is the Sabil and the Sunnah. Upon you is the path and the Sunnah. And here we have to ask ourselves, are these two words, is he just repeating himself? Is he emphasizing? Or is he mentioning them with two distinct meanings? Alaykum as-sabil, alaykum bis-sabil was-sunnah. Upon you is the path and the sunnah. And so, like we mentioned, the word sunnah, linguistically, it can mean tariqah. It can mean the way of somebody or their path. And so here is he emphasizing upon you is the sabil and upon you is the sunnah, i.e. as if the two of them are the same, or is he intending by it something else? And the way I like to understand it from that which is explained is that alhamdulillah, is that the sabil here is the minhaj, the methodology, the way you arrive at your results. And the sunnah is the results, the aqidah, the Islam, right? That which contradicts bid'ah, the fundamentals of the religion. So it's not just enough that you arrive at the right results, but instead it's that you arrive at the right results according to the methodology that should be adopted to get to such result. من قال في القرآن برأيه أخطأ وإن أصاب. Whoever speaks about the Quran with his opinion, he is in error even if he is correct, because he didn't follow the methodology. If a person of innovation gets a correct answer about who Allah is, or about Allah's names or his qualities, or about belief in the messenger or the last day or the books, then that doesn't alter the fact that the method that they used to get to that correct answer was inappropriate. So Ubay ibn Ka'b, he's saying upon you is a sabil, upon you is the path, i.e. the method that you use to get to the religion, which we call the minhaj or the minhaj, right? وَلِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. And for all of you, we have made a legislation as well as a minhaj, a path that you follow to get to that legislation. So upon you is the sabil, and upon you is the sunnah, i.e. the sharia, the religion of Islam in totality. So these two things are necessary. Upon you is the path, i.e. the minhaj, and upon you is the sunnah, i.e. the sharia, the result, the answer, what Allah wants you to believe and what Allah wants you to know and what Allah wants you to do. And so Ubay ibn Ka'b is telling us that upon us is both of those things, i.e. it is wajib upon us that we adhere to the two of those things, the minhaj as well as the sharia, the method as well as the result, the sabil as well as the sunnah. And so this is a great statement from Ubay ibn Ka'b, alaykum bis-sabil was-sunnah. After he talks about the obligation, Ubay ibn Ka'b, he goes on, he talks about the benefit of being on the sabil and the sunnah. And one thing I like to point out in this narration is that this narration helps clarify the question that many people ask often. How do I know if somebody is Salafi or not? How do I know if somebody is from Ahl Sunnah or not? If they are on the sabil, then inshallah they're from Ahl Sunnah. Because the sabil is what differentiates between us and them. The methodology that we use is what distinguishes us from them. And even more so if they're on the sunnah as well. If they're accurate, then even more so. But even if somebody makes an error, and so they miss the sunnah in a particular issue or another, If they were on the sabil, then they are from the people of the Sunnah. And so, like we said, the sabil is the methodology that you use to arrive at your conclusions, the path that you go down to understand the religion. وَنَضْرِبْ مَثَلًا, right? We'll set an example. If a person asks you, where is Allah? And you say that Allah is above his throne, above the seven skies, separate from his creation. What is the method that you use to reach such an answer? If the method that you use to reach such an answer was that you looked in the Quran, you looked in the Sunnah, you looked at the statements of the Salaf, the Sahaba, and you found that that is what they said, then your answer, the method that you used to get to that answer, was the sabil. That was the path that you traveled to get to your answer. And the answer that Allah is above the seven skies, then this answer is the Sunnah. This is your Aqidah. This is your Sharia. This is your Islam. This is your Iman, that Allah is above the seven skies. And so like this, you followed the right sabil and you arrived at the Sunnah. If somebody follows the sabil but makes a mistake, they're still counted from the people of Ahl Sunnah. But if somebody gets the right answer while following another sabil, while following another methodology, another path to arrive at that answer, then even though they have the correct answer, they're not considered to be from Ahl Sunnah. So for example, if we ask someone, does Allah have a hand? And their response is, yes, Allah has a hand because Allah is like us. And everything that exists is similar in some shape or another. Then they've gotten to the right answer that Allah has a hand. But the method that they use to get to that answer is not the sabil that we follow. It's not the path that we follow. And so even if they got the right answer, they're not on the sabil. And like this, you see a lot of the things from the Asha'ira and their refutations against the Mu'tazila, or somebody from Ahl Sunnah in general and their refutations against the Shia, right? They might have the right answer, but when they're from the people of innovation, they didn't use the right methodology to get to that answer. So Ubay ibn Ka'b is saying, upon you is the sabil as well as the Sunnah. And the benefit of that, Ubay, he says, because there is no person, there's no slave on the earth who is on the sabil as well as the Sunnah and then remembers Allah, and so his eyes well up out of the fear that he has based on his knowledge about Allah Azza wa Jal, and then Allah would punish him after that. So if you're on the sabil and the Sunnah, you have the right methodology and the right understanding of Islam and the right approach to Islam, and then you remember Allah, and that remembrance of Allah causes your eyes to well up out of the fear or out of the knowledge-based fear that you have about Allah, Allah won't punish you after that. This is the statement of Ubay ibn Ka'b. And he says, and there is nobody on the earth, there is no slave on the earth who is upon the sabil as well as the Sunnah, and then remembers, i.e. Ar-Rahman, inside of themselves, right? If the first one is the mentioning aloud, or even inside of themselves, they recall, they think about Allah inside of themselves, and that causes their skin to curl out of their knowledge-based fear of Allah, there is no slave on the earth who that is his condition, except that his example is like the example of a tree who its leaves have dried up. And it is in such a state when a strong wind blows against it, causing its leaves to fall off, right? Tahadta It's like when you take a stick that's dried with leaves and you shake it and all the leaves fall off. He said, and so their example is like the example of a tree whose leaves have dried and it is in such a state when a strong wind comes into contact with it and it causes its leaves to fall off. So that person, his sins fall off the same way those leaves fall off of such a tree. So that's the benefit for the one who calls to, preserves, and revives the Sabil and revives the Sunnah. That's the benefit, that they won't get punished and that their sins will be forgiven. This is the statement of Ubay ibn Ka'b from the Sahaba. And then he says a beautiful statement that we'll hear repeated often, and it's one of my favorite principles in Islam. He says, and indeed, being balanced, right? Being balanced and sufficient or sufficed with the Sabil and the Sunnah is better than putting a lot of effort into that which is opposed to the Sabil and the Sunnah. So one of you needs to look at his actions, whether it is working hard or being balanced, or even maybe one might say low. He needs to pay attention to his actions, that they are upon the minhaj of the Prophet as well as their Sunnah. And so here, this last sentence is a sentence, it's a phrase that should be written with gold ink. Sticking to the little bit that you know is the Sunnah, right? If you know something is according to the methodology of the Salaf and according to the Sunnah, right? It is the correct answer that is in the Aqidah, that is in the Sharia, that is in the Iman. Sticking to that little bit that you know for sure is better than working hard. And this working hard, it could be working hard and trying to figure out the correct answer, or it could be working hard and doing an abundance of action. But sticking to whatever might even be the little bit that you know from the Sabil and the Sunnah is better than working hard and something that is not from the Sabil and the Sunnah. If you know the answer, right, you know of a valid answer that is in the correct methodology, that is according to the correct methodology and corresponds to the correct view in Islam. And then there is an issue that is outside of that. Sticking to what you know is the Sunnah is better than doing something that is an abundance of what is outside of that. Whether that abundance and that working hard is in you trying to figure out, is it okay, is it not okay? Or whether that working hard and abundance is in doing a lot of that action as opposed to doing a little bit of the Sunnah. And we'll set another example for this, because I love this statement. You'll see it repeated often. Today, with the youth, we were talking about the subha, the tesbih, the dhikr beads. What is the methodology of the Salaf regarding remembering Allah? What do we know for sure that they did? What was their minhaj? What was the path that they would take as it would come to, as it relates to remembering Allah? We know that the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded his wife to use her fingers because they're going to speak on the Day of Judgment. And like this, we saw from the Salaf, this would be their habit. And somebody might say, well, if I use my fingers, I might only, remember Allah 33 times after the Salat, 33 times Subhanallah, 33 times Alhamdulillah, 33 times Allahu Akbar. But outside of that, I'm not, using my fingers that much. I'm not remembering Allah that much. But they know that this is a valid way, and it is according to the Sabil and the Sunnah. And then you have somebody who says, well, if I take this subha, this dhikr bead, and I carry it with me, then I will remember Allah all the time. I'm constantly just clicking the bead, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And so it's something that helps me do a lot more. Using the dhikr beads helps me do a lot more. And so here we have doing a little bit of what we know to be the sunnah versus working hard in something that we don't know to be the sunnah. And so that working hard, whether it's me working hard trying to figure out, are dhikr beads permissible to use or haram to use? And there's disagreement. But me trying to figure out which one is the right answer versus me just sticking to what I know to be from the sunnah, which one is better? Me sticking to what I know to be from the sunnah is better. And then what about if we say the working hard is mentioning Allah 500 times versus mentioning Allah a smaller amount in a way that I know to be the sunnah? Which one is better? Mentioning Allah 500 times in a way that I don't know to be upon the sabil and the sunnah is not as good as mentioning Allah 33 times in a way that I know to be according to the sabil and the sunnah. So doing a little or being balanced in just doing the sabil and the sunnah is better than working hard in something that is not the sabil and the sunnah. And like we say, that is regardless if that working hard is trying to figure out if it's the sabil or the sunnah. Is this permissible or not? But you know a correct way to do it. Okay, just do what you know to be from the sabil and the sunnah. Right? Can the khatib give the khutbah and then somebody else lead the salah? Is that permissible or not? Can the khatib give the khutbah and then somebody else lead the salah? What's the sabil and the sunnah? When we look at the sabil, the methodology of the salaf, and we look at what the answer they arrived at from the sunnah was, the khatib is the imam in the salah. I know that to be the right answer. So sticking to what I know to be the right answer is better than me trying to figure out, well, can we do it this way? Well, let's look and what were the statements of the scholars and what is the reasoning and the argumentation and the analogy and what does this one say and what does that one say? Doing what I know to be the sunnah is easier and better than figuring out something that I don't know to be the sunnah. And then if somebody says, well, you know, this guy is really eloquent at speaking, but his qira'ah, his recitation of Quran isn't as nice as this guy. So we want to have the best of both worlds. We want to have this guy give the khutbah, but this guy lead the salat so we can enjoy the salat a lot more. Which one is better? The person who is good at the khutbah, who is qualified to lead the salat, leading the salat, which is according to the sabil and the sunnah, even though it's a little bit, it's lesser than you might get from the other person's recitation. Or doing something that you don't know to be the sabil and the sunnah, even if it gets you more. Even if it gets you more enjoyment in the salat, it gets you more pondering and crying in the salat, but you don't know this action to be from the sabil and the sunnah. Even if it is permissible, according to some, you say, you know what, it's better to stick to what I know from the sabil and the sunnah, even if it's a little bit, versus working hard in something that I don't know to be from the sabil and the sunnah. Whether it's working hard to figure it out or working hard by doing an abundance of something that I don't know to be from the sabil and the sunnah. So this statement, like I say, it's one of the best statements that you can build your Islam around. Sticking to what you know, even if it's a little bit from the sunnah, is better than working hard in things that you don't know to be the sunnah, let alone things that are actually innovation. And so this statement of Ubay is a beautiful one. And indeed, sticking or being limited in the sabil and the sunnah is even better, is still better than working hard in something that is outside of the sabil and the sunnah, or against the sabil and the sunnah. And so he says, so one of you should always pay attention to his actions, that regardless if he's working hard or limiting himself, that needs to be on the minhaj and that of the prophets, and that needs to be on their sunnah. And so here he's actually explaining what he used other words to articulate earlier on. So earlier on, he said sabil and sunnah, but here at the end, he says that it be upon the minhaj of the prophets and their sunnah. So we know that the meaning of the word sabil here, what he's intending by it is minhaj. And minhaj, like we said, it's the way that you get to your results and get to your answer. Like our minhaj is Quran, Sunnah, with the minhaj or the understanding of the salaf of this ummah. So I don't do anything in my religion except that it is according to the Quran, the Sunnah, and the way I understand it is the understanding of the salaf of this ummah. Because a lot of people say the Quran, but then when it comes time to understand the Quran, they don't understand the Quran, or they don't apply the Quran in the light of the Sunnah. So they take the Quran and they separate the Sunnah from it. That's not our minhaj. And then you have another large group of people who say they follow the Quran and they accept the Sunnah, but they take the Quran and the Sunnah in a way that is outside of the understanding of the Salaf of this ummah. And it is not our minhaj until it is Quran, Sunnah, according to the understanding of the Salaf of this ummah. And like this, a person is upon the sabil in the minhaj. And an example of that to show the difference, right? Let's take an example. Allah says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. Let's give a different example. I like this example. An example of how we see that the people, they follow things differently if they're not on our minhaj and can arrive at the wrong results. Allah says, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Allah says, then marry what is appeasing to you from the women, 2, 3, 4. So how many is that? 2, 3, 4. A person, if they're not following the sunnah, they won't know how to apply this ayah, because this word wa can mean and it can also mean or. So is Allah telling you to marry what is pleasing to you from the women 2 and 3 and 4, which is 9? Or is Allah telling you to marry what is pleasing to you from the women 2 or 3 or 4? And so somebody who just claims they want to take the Quran without any sunnah, without any understanding of the salaf, then they'll go astray. And then somebody who claims they want to follow the Quran and the sunnah without the understanding of the salaf, they'll say, no, look at this ayah, 2 and 3 and 4 is 9. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he died on 9 women. The Prophet had 9 wives when he died. So that is 9 in the Quran and 9 in the Sunnah. But when you apply the understanding of the Salaf to this ayah, you see that the word wa here, it means or, 2 or 3 or 4. And the Prophet having 9 wives was something that was exclusive for him. And so it's necessary that we take the Quran and the Sunnah and the Salaf all together, that we not separate amongst them. And like this will be on the Sabil and the Sunnah, the minhaj of the prophets and their Sharia, or their way, their religion. So that's the ether of Ubay ibn Ka'b. It was a long ether, but it's, like I say, one of the better ones. And the connection to the chapter is the fact that the sins of the person who is on the Sabil and the Sunnah and remembers Allah and is scared of him with knowledge, then Allah won't punish them and Allah will remove their sin. So that's the reward for it. So we've mentioned several rewards now. The author, he goes on to mention another narration. He says, أخبرنا عبد الواحد ابن عبد العزيز قال أنبأنا محمد بن أحمد الشرقي قال حدثنا عمر بن أيوب بن إسماعيل قال حدثنا إسحاق بن إبراهيم المروزي. They write it here al-Marwazi, but the way I know it is al-Mirwazi, and that's Marwu Shahajan, right? And then there's another Marruth, which they say al-Marruthi, right? And that's the one with the fatha. And we've mentioned that before. He says, حدثنا أبو إسحاق إسماعيل الأقرع قال سمعت الحسن بن أبي جعفر يذكر عن أبي الصهباء عن سعيد بن جبير عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال النظر إلى الرجل من أهل السنة يدعو إلى السنة وينهى عن البدعة عبادة. Allahu Akbar. Some of these statements are like amazing, and that's why I love this book, because this book gathers for us jewels and treasures of the Salaf that otherwise might be lost. So when we look at the books of hadith, you know, they're often focused on what the Prophet ﷺ said. And without a doubt, that's the pinnacle. That's the highest level. But there's something to be gained from understanding the statements of the Salaf and how they understood this religion. And the like of it is in this statement of Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Al-Lalakai, he said that Abdul Wahid ibn Abdul Aziz informed us. He said that Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Sharqi informed us. He said that Umar ibn Ayyub ibn Ismail narrated to us. He said that Ishaq ibn Ibrahim al-Mirwazi narrated to us. He said that Abu Ishaq Ismail al-Aqra narrated to us. He said that I heard Al-Hasan ibn Abi Ja'far mentioning on the authority of Abi Sahba, on the authority of Sa'id ibn Jubair, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who said, looking at a person from Ahlus Sunnah, just looking at a person from Ahlus Sunnah, while they are calling to the Sunnah and forbidding innovation, is an act of worship. Allahu Akbar. Look at the connection between this and the chapter title when we talk about the reward. It's similar to what we talked about before, the one who man sanna fil islami sunnatan, right? They get the reward of everybody who follows them. And man da'a ila al-huda, and whoever calls to guidance, he gets the reward of everybody who does it. But also in the aspect of the fact that Allah made just looking at these type of people an act of worship shows you how prestigious these people are to Allah. The fact that looking at a scholar who is engaged in conveying the Sunnah and forbidding the innovation, just looking at them, Allah made that an act of worship, right? i.e. learning your religion. And even if you're not actively learning your religion, passively learning your religion is an act of worship. When you go to the halaqah and you see the sheikh and how he sits and how he stands and how he talks and how he teaches and how he warns and how he reprimands, these things become an act of worship. And that's something that Allah has only made for the people of knowledge. That looking at them is an act of worship, because looking at them is a practical demonstration of the religion. Looking at these individuals, these scholars of Islam who embody the Quran and the Sunnah, they implement and exemplify the Quran and the Sunnah. Looking at them is a practical demonstration of how to apply and how to understand the Quran and the Sunnah. So even looking at the person from the Sunnah who is upon the Sabil and the Sunnah, when he's calling to the Sunnah and forbidding the bid'ah, then that is an act of worship. And that's prestige. that Allah makes these individuals a way to worship him. Loving these individuals, watching these individuals, learning from these individuals, because of how pleased Allah is with them, Allah has made just looking at them when they're engaged in implementing this sunnah an act of worship. And who else has that value? Looking at Gordon Ramsay make a dish is not an act of worship. Looking at a doctor do surgery is not an act of worship. Looking at a poet be brilliant in his poetry, it's not an act of worship. But looking at that person on the sunnah, conveying the sunnah and warning against bid'ah, just looking at them is an act of worship. Because even if you're not actively learning your religion, you're passively learning it, right? We know the example of those three people who came to the gathering, and so one of them made a space and got closer, and one of them shied away and the other one left. And the Prophet ﷺ, as far as this one, then he came closer, Allah came closer to him, and this one, he was shy, so Allah was shy from him, and this one turned away, so Allah turned away from him. We understand that just being in these environments, and like this, even looking at the scholar, Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he equated that action to being equal to an act of worship, or being included amongst the actions of worship. So subhanallah, how great of a prestige do those individuals have? Al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, أخبرنا محمد بن أحمد بن سهل أو ابن سهل قال أنبأنا محمد بن أحمد بن الحسن قال حدثنا بشر بن موسى قال حدثنا عبيد بن يعيش قال حدثنا يونس بن بكير قال حدثنا محمد بن إسحاق عن الحسن أو الحسين بن عبيد الله عن عكرمة عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه قال والله ما أظن على ظهر الأرض اليوم أحدا أحب إلى الشيطان هلاكا مني فقيل وكيف فقال والله إنه لتحدث البدعة في مشرق أو مغرب فيحملها الرجل إلي فإذا انتهت إلي فقمعتها بالسنة فترد عليه كما أخرجها. طيب, he says that Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Sahal, he informed us. He says that Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn al-Hasan informed us. He said that Bishr ibn Musa narrated to us. He said that Ubayd ibn Ya'ish narrated to us, who said that Yunus ibn Bukair narrated to us, who said that Muhammad ibn Ishaq narrated to us on the authority of Al-Hasan or Al-Husayn, the son of Ubaydullah, on the authority of Ikrimah, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, or radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, who said, Wallahi, I swear by Allah, I don't think there is anyone on the surface of the earth today who the shaitan would love more that they would be destroyed than me. I don't think there's anyone on the surface of the earth today who the shaitan would love it if they died more than me. It was said to him, and why do you say such a thing? How can you say such a thing? He said, Wallahi, I swear by Allah, a bid'ah will occur in the east or in the west, and a person will bring it to me. A person will carry it to me. And when it gets to me, I uproot it with the sunnah. I snatch it out with the sunnah. And it gets rejected back to them or to him the way that he produced it in the first place. It gets rejected back to him or refuted back to him, returned back to him, just like he was the one who made it up in the first place. And so this statement from Ibn Abbas, it's a lovely statement. It has a lot of benefits in it. One, the most despised people to the shaitan are the scholars who call to the sunnah, who preserve the sunnah, who revive the sunnah. These are the people the shaitan hates the most. And that's why you find the enmity constantly directed against them. Even for the people that are against Islam, you find them being tolerant of the deviant Muslim. You find them being accepting of tasawwuf, accepting of the Khawarij to some extent, accepting of all of these deviant groups, right? You find them praising them even. The Muslim thinkers, the Muslim theologians, the Muslim intellectuals, etc., etc. But when it comes to the people of the Sunnah, not only are the kuffar against them, but you see that the one thing that all of the different people of innovation can agree on is their enmity to the Sunnah. And this is because there is nobody who is more despised by the shaitan than the person calling to the Sunnah, preserving the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah. The question is, how does that relate to the chapter title? What is their reward? And the reward is understood by the opposites. If the shaitan hates this person the most, then whoever is the most opposite of shaitan loves this person the most. And so we see that Allah, for example, loves these people the most. Right? And we see that the people upon the Sunnah love these people the most. So the worser you are, the more you hate these people. But the better you are, the more you love these people. And that is the reward, that you get the love of those who matter. And so when we find the people struggling and striving to be accepted, vying for likes and clicks and approval, and people to support them in their positions and their opinions, then we see that the person who is on the Sunnah, calling to the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah, right? Then this person is going to receive the love of those who matter. When Allah loves a slave, he tells Jibril that I love so-and-so, so love so-and-so. And Jibril tells the inhabitants of the sky that Allah loves so-and-so, so love so-and-so. And then Allah sends the acceptance of that person into the hearts of the people. And so if the person who is on the Sunnah, like Ibn Abbas was saying about himself, is the most hated, is the most despised by shaitan, then it only stands to reason that he would be the most loved by other than the shaitan. And why does the shaitan hate him? Ibn Abbas tells us the reason. And the reason is about how much he's on the Sunnah and how much he calls to the Sunnah and preserves the Sunnah and revives the Sunnah. So Ibn Abbas, when he was asked, how can you say this statement? He said, Wallahi, a person will innovate an innovation in the East or in the West. And in this statement, there's two benefits that I want to point out. The first of them is that it does not require that the bid'ah, that the thing that is against the Sunnah, be done in your locale for it to be refuted. Right? Sometimes it's necessary that the person of knowledge refute innovations that aren't occurring around them. Somebody might introduce something in the West, and it takes the scholars of the East to refute it. Or they might introduce something in the East, and it takes the scholars in the middle to refute it. And likewise. And so from the false claims that are made sometimes is, well, we're not even dealing with that innovation here, so don't bring it up. And that statement has truth to some extent, but it does not mean that it can't be refuted just because it didn't happen in your locale. For example, in our masjid, walhamdulillah, nobody celebrates the Prophet's birthday, right? Or nobody celebrates the middle of Rajab. Does that mean we can't talk about it? Does that mean we can't warn the people against this innovation because it's not happening in our small community or in our locale? No. An innovation might occur in the East or the West, and if it's brought to a person who is qualified to speak about it, then he can speak about it, even if it's not happening in their location. Which leads me to the second point that I want to bring. And that is from the statements that we hear people repeating nowadays often, is that the scholars in the East don't know what happens here. They don't know about the reality on the ground here in America, for example. And this is falsehood, right? It is a trick of the shaitan to separate between the people and scholarship. To think that those scholars, just because they're not here in America, don't understand the reality of what goes on. And so they talk about things without really knowing what's happening, is a criticism of them. It would be them speaking without knowledge and running their mouth in things that they don't understand. And to what group of people is that something that is acceptable? And so we know that when the scholars, when they talk about an issue, even if it's not something that's happening in Saudi or happening in India or Pakistan or happening in whatever country it may be, and they talk about it here in America, they talk about the issue that is happening in America, it's not proper to say, well, that scholar in the Middle East doesn't know what's happening here in the West. He doesn't really understand the realities of things. La. Ibn Abbas is saying a person will introduce a bid'ah in the East or the West, and a man or a person will bring it to me. And so when it reaches me, I uproot it with the Sunnah. The Sunnah is the same wherever you go. And if you understand the Sunnah and you understand the Sabil, you understand that which opposes it. You understand that which is other than it. And so it is from the falsities of the people and the tricks of the shaitan to try to get a person to believe that the scholars in the East don't know what's happening here in the West. And you often see that the people who champion this statement are the people who want to put themselves in the position of being the scholars of the West. And this is something that they use as a tool to separate between the people and actual scholarship. And so the people take less qualified, more ignorant, more youthful, more impetuous people as leaders. And it's easy to just say when somebody tells them, well, Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Fawzan, Sheikh Abdul Muhsin, Sheikh, right? It's easier for them to say, well, they don't know what's happening here. They don't really understand the reality of this issue, right? Things are different there than they are here. They don't know how to maneuver with the Western nuances. And this is from the falsehood. Ibn Abbas, he said, a bid'ah will be introduced in the East or the West, and someone will carry it to me. And when it arrives to me, I uproot it with the Sunnah. How do I get rid of it? How do I snatch it out the ground and make sure that it doesn't continue to grow? I use the Sunnah. I uproot it with the Sunnah. And thus it gets rejected back to the one who introduced it in the first place. Once I uproot it, it gets thrown back at the one who innovated it in the first place. Here's your bid'ah. You keep it. Because it's not allowed to grow in our garden. It's not allowed to grow on the banks of our Sharia. Right? And like this. So this statement of Ibn Abbas is another beautiful statement that has tons of benefits about the methodology of the Salaf. We'll take two more narrations. He says, or one more. He says, أخبرنا عيسى بن علي قال أنبأنا عبد الله بن محمد البغوي قال حدثنا داود بن عمر قال حدثنا أبو شهاب عن الأعمش عن عمارة عن عبد الرحمن بن يزيد عن عبد الله وحدثنا الأعمش عن مالك بن الحارث عن عمارة عن عبد الرحمن بن يزيد عن عبد الله بن مسعود قال الاقتصاد في السنة خير من الاجتهاد في بدعة. Al-Lalakai, he says that Isa ibn Ali informed us. He said that Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Baghawi informed us. Al-Baghawi, the famous scholar, the one who connected the old with the new, right? He connected the previous generation to the later generation because of how long he lived. He was born in the year 214. He died in the year 317. So Al-Baghawi, right? he met the likes of Imam Ahmed, while at the same point in time, a lot of the younger, later scholars met Baghawi. So they would get a high chain through him. Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Baghawi, Abu al-Qasim, right? He said that Dawood ibn Amr, he narrated to us. He said that Abu Shihab narrated to us on the authority of Al-A'mash, on the authority of Abdul Rahman ibn Yazid, on the authority of Abdullah. Ha. And like we said, when they say ha, they're transitioning to another chain. And remember, we said when somebody from the Tabi'een mentions Abdullah without restriction, it's more often referring to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Al-Lalakai, the second chain, he says, وَحَدَّثَنَا الْأَعْمَشِ and Malik ibn al-Harith. Right, so this chain, he just adds in Malik ibn al-Harith. And Umara and Abdul Rahman ibn Yazid and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who said, being limited in the Sunnah is better than working hard in the bid'ah. Being limited in the Sunnah is better than putting a lot of effort into the bid'ah. And this is the same statement that we've mentioned from Ubay ibn Ka'b. Al-iqtisadu fi sunnah khayrun min al-ijtihadi fi bid'ah. Being limited to the Sunnah, doing what you know, even if it's only a little bit from the Sunnah, is better than putting a lot of effort into bid'ah. It's better than putting a lot of effort to figure out, is this or isn't it bid'ah? Right? Is this or not? Is this bid'ah or is it not bid'ah? Is it okay or is it not okay? Just do what you know is okay. It's easier. It's better. And it's better than doing a lot of something that you don't know to be the Sunnah. Right? Let alone if you know it's bid'ah. Right? You do 100 raka'at incorrectly or do 1 raka'at correctly. Which one is better? Right? And so like this, al-iqtisadu fi sunnah, being limited with the Sunnah is better than exerting effort in the bid'ah. Being limited with the Sunnah is better than exerting effort with the bid'ah. Tayyib, how does this narration that only has this sentence connect to the chapter title? The reward for those who preserve, revive, and call to the Sunnah. Its connection is in the statement that it is better. And so if it is better to stick to or be limited to the Sunnah, limited in your calling to the Sunnah, limited in your revival of the Sunnah, limited to preserving the Sunnah, if it is better than bid'ah, then that means the reward of it is likewise better. As Allah says, وَهَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ. And is the reward of good anything other than something that is good? And so like this, sticking to what you know to be the Sunnah, even if it's limited, is better than trying to put a lot of effort and work hard and doing something that is not the Sunnah, let alone if you know it to be bid'ah. And so we'll stop at that amount. Like we say, this chapter is somewhat long. We've covered 10 narrations in this chapter so far. And let's not lose sight of what the chapter is, the reward of those who preserve, revive, and call to the Sunnah. What is their reward? What is the compensation that they get from Allah? We'll pick up next time with narration number 11. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. What does i'tiqad mean? I'tiqad is the masdar of i'taqada, ya'taqidu, what a person believes, right? So what a person believes is their i'tiqad. It's their belief. So it's a synonym of aqidah, which is a synonym of iman, which is a synonym of sunnah, which is a synonym of tawheed, which is a synonym of sharia, which is a synonym of usul ad-din, fiqh al-akbar, yani al-Islam in totality. All of these words are synonyms that are meant to convey the reality of Islam as it relates to action and belief, as opposed to that which contradicts it or goes against it from innovation. So this is the meaning of i'tiqad. And the word aqidah linguistically, it means a knot. The word aqidah linguistically, it comes from the word aqada, which means a knot. And they mentioned that the wisdom in calling what we believe a knot is because our hearts are tied to that information. And so just like when you have a bag that is tied up into a knot, nothing can get into that bag that isn't already there. And so when your heart is tied around this information like a knot, nothing that isn't part of your aqidah can get into and corrupt your aqidah. It can't get into your heart because it's tied off. And likewise, the things that are in your heart, they won't fall out. When you have a bag that's tied in a knot, if you turn it upside down, if you're carrying it, you don't have to worry about anything falling out. And so like this, when you have this aqidah, you don't have to worry about what you believe falling out of your heart and losing it one day. Also, they say that from the benefits of calling what we believe an aqidah or a knot is because this belief is what ties down our actions and keeps them firm. And what we mean by ties down our actions and keeps them firm is two things. One, without an aqidah, our actions will be useless. As Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَحَبِطَتْ مَا صَنَعُوا, and everything that they used to do fell off. When they were kufr, when they had kufr and they didn't have the proper aqidah, all of their actions fell off. No matter what they did. وَقَدِمْنَا إِلَى مَا عَمِلُوا مِنْ عَمَلٍ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ هَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. And we approached that which they did from actions. So they might have actions, but without the proper aqidah, their actions fall off. They fall off like dust when you spank a rug or smack a rug. Another reason that we say it keeps our actions tied down and firm, meaning when you have proper aqidah, it's what keeps you constant in the action. So a person who doesn't have proper aqidah, you find that showing up in their actions, that their actions won't be proper as well. But that proper aqidah is what ties your actions down so they stay and they continue, right? Indeed, in the body, there's a piece of flesh. If it is righteous, then the entirety of the body is righteous. And if it's corrupt, the entirety of the body is corrupt. Indeed, it's the heart. So when you have that proper aqidah in your heart, it keeps your actions from being useless on the day of judgment. And it keeps your actions from stopping, right? From running away, from getting away from you in this dunya. And so when we talk about how does a person maintain acting according to the Quran and the Sunnah, they can't do it until they have the aqidah that's necessary. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he spent so much time in Mecca focusing solely on aqidah, that by the time he moved to Medina and the actions began to get legislated, it was easier for the Sahaba to adopt them and accept them because that aqidah was there. So their actions were grounded. And there's so many examples that we could talk about, but we got off topic, on topic. But that's what the word i'tiqad means. It's just another word for aqidah. And we said the word sabil in that context of the author of Ubay ibn Ka'b, it meant minhaj, the method by which you arrive at your results in the religion. If the sharia, if your aqidah and your actions are the results that you need to implement, then how did you get to that result? How did you get the information? How did you get the proper way to do the action? The method that you implemented the action. That is the sabil, that is the minhaj or the minhaj, right? And so these two terms, you often hear them referred to often, al-aqidah to al-minhaj wal aqidah, right? And the word minhaj is more general than the word aqidah. Minhaj applies to all of the aspects of the religion. What is your minhaj in applying the act of worship? What is your minhaj in your character? What is your minhaj in your aqidah? So it's the method, while aqidah is simply what you believe. In a good, side note, like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala says in that poem that's attributed to him, Al-Lamiyya ya sa'ili an madhhabi wa aqidati. The same principle. O person who has asked me about my madhhab, i.e. the way I got to my place, and my aqidah. and what was the information that I have at that place, right? How did I get to the Aqidah? What was the method I used? And what was the answer that I was going to give itself? Ya sa'ili an madhhabi wa aqidati, ruziqa al-huda man lil hidayati yas'alu. May he be guided to guidance, the one who asks about guidance. Now, looking at the person that is upon the Sunnah as an act of worship, subhanAllah, I never heard that. Now, it's the statement of Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. Just being around the people of the Sunnah is a great benefit for the soul. Indeed, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the person who has a good friend, then it's like the one who sells perfume. Maybe he'll give you some, or maybe he'll sell you some. And if nothing else, then the good, pleasant smell will get to you. And the person who has an evil friend is like the one who blows in the bellows, right? Who, ignites the coals. Maybe he'll burn you. I'm missing the second one. And if not, it'll reach you from him, that unpleasant smell. وإياكم وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.